Camila, I had a question for you. I'm so glad you're supporting direct democracy. What are your thoughts about people's assemblies in each community crafting their own legislation and their own policy?
Well, thank you, Kirk. That is a great question, and actually something that I wanted to go deeper in because this is like again a mechanism that has become I would say a very promising device to be able to hack the system. So, for a little bit of reference, we have had in the last 10 years a lot of experiments with citizen assemblies. We had citizen assemblies in Iceland for suggesting a new constitution. There is in Barcelona at the local level, they use citizen assemblies for very specific issues, and they were used basically like a response in a way. If there was an issue that needed to be resolved about, for example, climate, they would call a citizen assembly and with randomly selected citizens or residents in order to give a project of a bill or something in order for, then the government to pick it up and then, to work it out, right? So such as citizens' assemblies or people's assemblies. I prefer people's in the sense that citizens already, as we know in the United States, is already a border, right, of the people that have, papers and those who don't, and even people that are legal residents for a while now, putting into question, right? So it's better to talk about the people that inhabit the territory. So residents' assemblies or people's assemblies. The only issue with this is that people's assemblies are not really direct democracy in the straight sense, because as it is only a suggestion for a government. And here the example is with the France Climate Assembly that was 2020, I think, around that time. And basically this citizen assembly was called because France needed to pass legislation to get to the targets of carbon emissions. So they needed to make some tough calls, like, for example, cut air travel and do all kinds of things that will be tweaking the way that we behave in common, and therefore and would be kind of more uncomfortable maybe or whatever. There were putting more bike lanes, for example, instead of like bus. All these kinds of things that need to be resolved, and you need to have more the input of the community, but also you need to have some ground for pushing back against oligarchy of all the basically companies that are profiting from the status quo. So you need kind of two things. One, you need the compliance basically of the people to understand where the limits of nature, of us in a way living in this world, of our comfort. We know that if everybody lives as people live in Europe or the United States, then we would need 6 planets, right? So that kind of like welfare cannot be expanded. Not everybody can have an AC running all day, basically, because then we burn everything down. So we need to have people on board to understand the limits, the ecosystem limits in a way that we're living in, and therefore to demand more strong action. And that assembly met 7 times with people from all walks of life. There was demographics, people from old, young, different professions, rural, urban, women, men, all this kind of a constellation that was trying to mimic the demographics of the country. And and these were people with no other no previous experience, and in 7 sessions they came up with the most progressive green bill of all times, basically. Greenpeace, all of the organizations were really on board with it. And the president, when he called the assembly, said, well, whatever the people speaks, whatever the people decides, I will, execute with no filter. That was his, quote, no filter. However, the moment that this bill came out, this proposition came up, and it was super radical in a way, and people were all on board with it, then the president said, well, the procedures forced me to put this bill into Congress and then pass it. So the filter was there. And then only a third of the bill came up as, part of it. It was, again, something that would allow for the policy to be more green in a way, and an ecosystemic, bounded in a way. However, it was a far cry from the ones that the people put up. So we know that the people are more radical than the representatives. This is historic. Okay, so representatives are there to tame the people, and the people are always on the forefront. So citizen assemblies, popular assemblies, give this opportunity for people to be radical and to push the agenda forward. And even if that agenda is not 100% executed, it just moves, the limit of what is discussed. So in a way, it puts the government in a bind in a way, because they need to respond. And even if a weak response would be better than we have today. So I think it is a very good way to hack the system. And it's a very good demand to have at the local level. Because again, a mayor doesn't need to change, the system in order to say, well, we're going to have citizen assemblies now. And they can actually input in the code and the municipal code. But if you have a procedure in which you call citizen assemblies or popular assemblies to decide, and you as a mayor, you pledge to basically go with it, then you really have hacked the system at the local level. And that would be able to be a model for other places. And because it is small, and again, this Simson is completely right. And where do we agitate? Where we live in a way, and this is where we have the power. We don't have power in the federal level; it's too far away. We have power where we reside, and therefore we need to use that power in order to hack the system at the local level. And instead of having like a systemic change from above, have systemic change from below, that then we can scale up in a way. So I think that is a great hacking, and doesn't replace a organization on the ground, but it's another kind of level that is an interface maybe between organizations that are really social, that do not have like a recognition from the state, to have actually kind of a middle a mechanism to interface between the social and the political in a way. So I think it is a great way to move forward if it's something that we can agitate for. Also, in addition to rights of nature, which is like a content-based demand, the other is a procedural way demand in a way that we need a mechanism in order to be able to force government to do things that we think are necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Camilla. Thanks for that question, Kirk. Is it Cherish?
Hi. Hi, everyone. I'm very new to this, so if my question is amateur, I apologize in advance. But so one of the ways it sounds like from what I'm hearing you say, Camilla, we can go about this is, we're working right now at state level legislation. And I was excited to hear like Potsdam, for example, in New York, and Orleans. Which is it the whole county of Orleans? Because I was looking up if there's an Orleans town, but it looks like
No,
it's
it's a
Orleans County.
very small town.
Oh, it is a very small town. Okay. So as I was thinking about this, they've had some small wins, it sounds like, big wins to us, but I'm sure like at a state level, they consider it like small wins when it comes to rights of nature. And I know that there's a lot of agitation as it relates to the Western New York Stamp industrial site. And I was looking up, that's in the town of Alabama, and there's like only 1,000 citizens in that town. So my question is, has there been any discussions around doing this at a town level for Orleans, or I mean for Alabama, so that we could then maybe use it as a win with the stamp? I know it's a super controversial and like big deal to talk about, and I don't want to like supplant what we're trying to do here with that, but is it anything that's been discussed with either with Sarah Howard, who I know is very involved in it from a legislative perspective, or a legal perspective, I should say, as we talk about the state level stuff, like running on two tracks, if you will?
I would just would answer that Kirk and Tish have been in discussion about this very thing, so I'll pass it over to them.
Yeah, hi, Cherish. Nice to see you here. That's one of the things, like when I talk after our break about the New York bill, I can't speak obviously to the town of Alabama. I'm not in New York, right? So Kirk, I don't know, you can pick up that part, but I will be talking a little bit about that, like how the state helps the local you know, and the coordination between the two. So, I mean, that part I think will get answered later on. So I'll let Kirk talk specifically about Alabama.
Right. I'm sorry, I missed part of your comments. I was writing some notes, but I did have conversations with, you know, with Sarah about the fight against stamp, and I was invited to start up a Rights of Nature subgroup in the fight, and Tish was very involved as well, and as was Paul and Anna. But then she actually changed course and said, "Look, I don't think Rights of Nature is a winnable strategy. Please don't do Rights of Nature work in this fight." So it was a kind of a slap in the face, and we kind of redirected. So, okay, we'll continue fighting stamp. We won't fight Rights of Nature in this context. We shifted our efforts to, you know, helping to pass the Great Lakes Bill of Rights instead. Hopefully, that'll change in the future.
Gotcha.
And I think, chairs, that'll also come up as part of our afternoon conversations about what else we could be doing. And I think that's exactly the kind of thinking we were hoping people would go down, you know, in the sense of you know, again, to what Sunsoon talked about, you know, if you're a part of an ecosystem, well, you have a duty and responsibility. And so just because you have procedural mechanisms, you know, to push things like the Great Lakes and Watersheds Bill of Rights, that's fine. But there are so many other things that we could and should be doing as part of being part of a place. And it's about investigating what this is. And so if it is about multiple places passing resolutions or laws, or taking other kinds of even extra jurisdictional actions to protect the place that you're a part of, you know, that's the very kind of thinking that needs to happen, and that right relationship only comes by way of deep resistance and finding means for resilience. So
Just was gonna jump on jump after what you just said, Kai, to say that it's very easy. It's not easy. It's terribly hard. But mentally, it comes easy to think, oh, we're facing something like stamp, and we need to use all the tools at our disposal. So Rights of Nature is this new amazing tool. Let's use it. However, when it comes to fights that are actually happening on the ground, what you, Kirk, you just shared is a representation of what I've heard other places, in that we're fighting a fight that is very complex. So we need to use the tools that we know. However, personally, at Talking Rivers, we believe that there is a chance to use tools like Rights of Nature in different scenarios. But going on what Kai just said, we can't just act when we're under attack, because many times we're too late. So there is the possibility for communities across New York State that are charter cities to actually bring forward by referendum Rights of Nature. You all have more privilege than anyone else in New York State when it comes to that. It's a complicated process. You have to get signatures. It involves a campaign, but you can make things happen at that level. And within communities, if you're in a small community and you know the people who are part of the town or village board, you can talk to them, start a conversation, because it's essential that we start to fight against extractivist death projects before they happen. Because once things start happening, it's really hard to fight against this oligarchic machine.
Right. And I think part of this is all about like you said, Sunsoon, it's this process and all these different tools. And like a lot of us, you know, we're so in our culture we believe that it's like one thing, right? Like there's going to be this silver bullet solution. Like if we're going to win. Like, and that's our mindset. And that's part of the problem. Whereas a lot of the work that's happening. So like with stamp, you know, like that may be too far along. Sure, you can try to block it through the legal process or whatever. But even if stamp does go in, right, there's going to be something else that comes after that. There's going to be, and so why not try to create the Rights of Nature is more the movement building. I think we have a lot of culture shifting and mind shifting that has to happen, paradigm shifting thinking, all that stuff. But it's that they're happening simultaneously, right, at the same time. And the more that people, I think, get back to the knowledge that I think all have within us, that we are nature, right? And once more and more people start feeling that, I think their actions will also change based on that. So these are just all tools. And if Alabama, the town, doesn't isn't ready, the people don't want to do that. I mean, you can't force them either, right? That's one other thing we've learned. Can't force anybody to do anything. You can share the knowledge and give them your experiences and that, and then it's up to them.
One thing that I think it is, is not surprising that there's pushback against rights of nature. There has been, as a legal scholar, we have, problems with the idea of rights, right? Part of my work is kind of a look at the intellectual roots of law and rights. And rights has to do with property. So in a way, the rights, you have rights over things in a way. And we consider nature a thing. So therefore we have rights to appropriate in a way. And this is basic for the liberal, mindset. So, but the language of rights was also very progressive from the ground up, because movements were using rights to fight back against oppression and oligarchy. So in a way, part of the struggle was doctrinal. It's like, should we go with rights of nature, even if it doesn't make a whole lot of sense within the current system? Or should we just use, that language that is commonplace, that people know that they're a frontier for struggle, for actually struggling for nature and an ecosystemic point of view? So I think we need to be flexible in how we approach the things on the ground. And if you have pushback on rights of nature at the town level, maybe, direct democratic mechanisms will not have that kind of pushback, because they're less liable to this kind of like more doctrinal, attack. Because, if you ask people if they want to actually participate and have a say in their local government, the most probable thing is people will say yes. So maybe they will be on board for a kind of citizen assembly, popular assembly mechanism that then would be able to, push for rights of nature. And so therefore you enter from another perspective, but I think they are kind of connected. We need them connected. And I wanted to highlight also at Tsinsun's presentation, put forward this idea of the committee to defend nature, because of course you can have rights and law there in the books, but then who is going to enforce that, right? You need an organization that is able to do that. You need an organization that is able to receive demands from the ground and organize and then push and be the interface with government. So we need to think about an infrastructure of local organization in which there is paths in order to push government to do things, or to bring awareness to the people. So looking at the struggle for rights of nature, not only as a kind of a movement that has a goal, and that goal is done when we win in a way, but in a way as a way to organize and to bring this awareness to more people, because it's necessary. So it's an opportunity. Even if we don't win this way, this moment, it is a way of bringing, democratic rights, community rights, and rights of nature together in a way in the struggle. So that's what I would say. It's important at the local level, and it's very experimental. And the smaller the town, the easier it is to push for transformative stuff, because really the people in power don't really care. So it's easier to hack the system at the local level, at the township level. So I think that is very interesting. That could happen in addition to, the bill that is at the state level that would allow for it to, have more experimentation. But I think everyone here is from different parts. So it would be great to kind of start planting seeds in the different towns in order to push forward.
Carol, you had your hand up.
Yes. So what I'd like to first say is, speaking as a woman religious, who's involved with a lot of different religious congregations around the country, I really appreciated your presentation, Camilla, because we've talked a lot about extractivism, and we try to also show how our awareness of it and the advocacy that's being done in South America, in Africa, or in other parts, how do we see ourselves also as understanding the extractivism in our own country and trying to make the connection? So I just say that because I think connecting extractivism with rights of nature, I hadn't thought of that before. So I really appreciate that very, very much. And I'm thinking I am an NGO liaison. I'm not at the UN a lot, but I'm just wondering how the group that's working on extractivism, how they're connecting it with rights of nature. They probably are. But again, in trying to see how we are working with so many different groups and communities, how, first of all, your presentation really helped make connections for me. With that said, I'm also now thinking of the environmental groups, the leaders I know in the Hudson Valley region. And I have a feeling that what you said will really connect with them. So I'm glad this initial 2 presentations is down to an hour, because I think I can get some of the leaders to really listen to this presentation. And I think they might also see connections between the issues they're working on with the way you connected with extractivism. You talked about the law. I think they're in agreement, because they really are very much in touch with their local municipalities and trying to change laws. So I'm really grateful for that. So I just wanted to say that. And then, Tzitzin, I'm so grateful how you presented it, because while your language was a little bit different, I'm thinking of how so many of us, with the work of Tom Berry, you really put into words what so many of us have been doing for 30 years almost. And I am really looking forward to looking at that toolkit and seeing how we can spread the word on that. Because I think this is then going to help us be more practical in how we talk about the rights of nature, so that those audiences we're listening to can maybe we can help it be more related to where they're coming from. I don't know, but I was very grateful for these 2 presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you for your words.
We've got about 5 minutes before our scheduled break, before we shift into the second half of our time together. Are there other comments, questions, additional statements that either of the presenters would like to make?
Yeah, I have thank you, Carol, for your very encouraging words, and I'm happy that it makes sense to you. This is what I live for, getting across. I would like to say that we need to, and I'm very much into Tzintzun's presentation and worldview, is that we are part of the ecosystem, and we need to think about our organizing as an ecosystem as well. So you come from a more religious background, and you have, religious, and I work with a lot of religious organizations in Latin America, because it is part of the culture in a way. It is very different to separate, difficult to separate both. But specifically with religious organizations, and I have been working in interreligious dialogue with, from Tibetans to, Muslims and, Jewish people everywhere around the world, in order to have common ground that is based on this idea that we are nature. And therefore, we need to think about ourselves as that. So organizations that not necessarily need to be about nature could be part of this ecosystem in the struggle, in a way. So I would not be very narrow focused, because at the end, we are organized naturally, organically in different ways. And basically organizations are the seeds of change. It's very difficult for us to do something individually. Like we can individually, but it's very weak. So when we need to feed or stand or, try to connect the different organizations that already exist, and religious organizations are very important in this regard, because people are already meeting there. They already want transformative change for social justice, and thinking about ourselves and organizations as part of this ecosystem that are there's no hierarchy, and we need to basically network and bind together in order to produce something. I think that is very important. So we need to be flexible in terms of what organizations are part of our strategy, I would say, and not just narrowly focus on river defenders, for example, because there's more out there in the local level.
Thanks, Camilla.
Yeah,
Dave, I saw you pop your hand up there.
Yeah, thank you. And Carol's comment resonated with me, because I was thinking about the links that have not always been apparent in different ways, but with Tzintzun's presentation. I was struck. In addition to working at a university, I also am a co-founder of a nonprofit that focuses on compassionate coexistence with wildlife. And, it seems to me that in most of the conversation that we've had about rights of nature, wildlife are sort of a secondary piece to the more, for lack of a better way to put it, static aspects of nature, whether we're talking about rivers or specific locations, mountains. And I wonder why that is. I wonder why maybe we don't try and bridge to a greater extent, in thinking about other beings and other animals that we have demonstrated sentience, we have demonstrated emotional response, we have a number of ways that people might react differently to them. And that might be an easier bridge to connect to when we think about rights of nature than talking about a river or talking about a mountain. And I wonder, I guess, in the broader group, what the reaction is to that. But thank you very much for your presentation as well. There were a lot of pieces to that that really spoke to me and are affirming about the way that I think about this struggle.
Thanks, Dave.
I know that you're at the very end, so I just wanted to say very quickly, thank you so much, Dave, for your comment, and it makes complete sense. I know that the people that have been doing rights in nature way longer than I have, so like Tish, Ben, Kai, have probably heard this question many more times. They can give much better answers. But I wanted to just say from what I've heard, from different people raise the exact same question, and some people have actually, this is out west. Different tribal nations have tried to, instead talking about rivers, to talk about fish, friends, fresh beings, because of that emotional connection. We personally started off doing work for rivers, but we also, one of the beings that we have been actively striving to start conversations about is, well, so-called American eel, a being that has been massacred in such a violent way across Turtle Island, what is now known as North America. And while American eel is thriving in some parts of the Hudson, in the St. Lawrence River Basin, the American eel has been decimated to almost zero. The beings that mostly live here have been quote unquote restocked. And also all this is mostly the fault of big dams that were put in the 1950s across the St. Lawrence River. So some of the work that we have done involves talking about beings like American eel. So we personally are very open to all those type of conversations. And I think it really, some people feel connected to rivers because we are a part of rivers. Some people feel more connected to be like wild rice, which happened out west. So it depends on who you're talking about, what you're talking to. And if you find a group, a community that really wants to advocate for the rights of a specific other than human animal, or plant or fungi, my guess would be you should go for it. Just make it happen, and do it.
Yeah, and I agree with that, but it's again that what's going to get them engaged, right? And if that does, but in those conversations, hopefully then it leads to, but even that one species going, like, how does that impact all the other species and even the other non-human species, right? In that so it allows you, I think, if you start with that, if there's an interest in a specific, to start talking about the ecosystem or the watershed or whatever as a whole, and then start making those connections. Because sometimes those people too get very disconnected because they're only focused on the one, right? And it's like, no, it's all interconnected. And so, people don't understand if the eel goes extinct there, like, how does that impact other life and then even up to humans? Those connections are a lot of times missing. So